Hello and welcome to the SI5 Improvement Podcast, where we bring to you supreme intelligence to self-improvement. With high performance from everyday people, because I truly believe that every single one of you has advice to give, value to share, that the listeners from this podcast can take into our own life, apply and improve. Because when you improve you improve your life. So welcome to today's episode. Ever since I started or had the idea for this podcast, I knew I was going to bring guests on, and there was one guest in particular that I wanted to bring on from the first get-go, and because I knew that she had such an inspirational story to share, a real battle that she overcome, and she's gone on to use that to the best possible positive you could use out of flipping a negative into a positive. And I know it's going to inspire many people. She is inspiring many people, and this is an episode you're definitely going to want to tune into. Her name is Sara Crosland. Sara, welcome to the podcast. Thank you very much for coming on. Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
I know you're a very busy lady. You're doing lots of things to help people. You're giving talks in several places. You're taking groups of people up mountains and all sorts. So probably done a couple of podcasts as well. I'm not sure, but I really appreciate your time. How are you today?
I'm good. Yeah, the sun's shining, which always helps, doesn't it? So yeah.
It was grey down here. You're up north, aren't you?
Yeah.
But it's a genuine question actually. Like, how are you? Because you have recovered from a brain tumour, and I know that this presents with its side effects afterwards, and I think like maybe fatigue can be an ongoing issue. So generally, how are you today?
It's one of those questions, isn't it? How many times do we get asked, how are you? And how many times do we answer it truthfully? Because I would just say, oh, I'm fine. But that kind of belies what's going on beneath the surface. So yeah, as you mentioned, I had surgery back in 2018 to remove a 4-centimetre brain tumour, as it was at that time. That left me, as you mentioned, with numerous side effects. So as a result of the surgery, I've lost my hearing on one side. I have invasive tinnitus. I have double vision. I have balance issues because the hearing and balance nerve was severed to access the tumour and remove it. And all of those contribute to fatigue, which is ongoing for me. So yeah, I'm fine. It's took me quite a while to get to a point where I can say that I'm fine and that, I can live with it, so to speak. But yeah, it does, provide challenges along the way.
Yeah, and you said about you've lost hearing in it's your left ear, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've read it in your book because I remember you saying that just before your surgery, your husband said that he loved you and it was the last time you'd ever hear it in your left ear.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Do you find that difficult, not being able to hear in your left ear, or have you adapted to that now?
So I think there's a common misconception really that because you've got two ears, losing your hearing on one side is okay. In actual fact, we need two ears to do a lot of things. So I have no direction of sound. I can't tell if someone shouts me across the street. I can't tell unless I see them do it. I can't tell where they're shouting me from. Going into noisy environments, so like restaurants, places like that, for example, anywhere where there's lots of sort of ambient background noise, it's really hard to hear one voice and filter out all the other noise. So yeah, it is problematic, and that I think causes a lot of problems for people because you then withdraw, you stop putting yourself into those scenarios where it's going to be difficult, and it is very easy to become quite socially withdrawn as a result of the hearing loss.
Yeah, I can imagine that presents its problems on a day-to-day basis. And the only thing I can possibly relate it to in my life is going out without my contact lenses in. You know, you can see, but I can't see people's faces. So that's the only thing I can relate that to. It's nothing compared, but um, so let's go back to when you first found out you had a brain tumor. How did you how did that come about? How did you like find out?
So I'd not been feeling well for quite some time, but it was one of those that you're that busy with life that you just kind of crack on and get on with it. You know, I had 3 teenagers at home. I was working as a high level teaching assistant in a primary school. I had a photography business that I was running alongside of that. So yeah, life was busy for me. So I think initially, I mean, when I look back now, there were sort of red flags there, but you kind of just dismiss it. You know, I'd had a couple of episodes of vertigo um, that had actually caused me to fall and injure myself. You know, to the point of needing surgery. And I think the major thing for me was the fatigue, and that kind of crept up very slowly on me. Added to that, I had to have my dog put down just before Christmas at the end of 2017. And it was after that, really, that everything kind of spiraled out of control in a way. And I just put it down to the stress of having my dog put to sleep. I started to develop a rash, which came and went. And eventually we found out that was a part of an autoimmune condition. But I think that was linked in other ways to what was going on in my brain. I was back and forth at the doctor's several times, had lots of blood tests done, you know, iron was a bit low, vitamin D was a bit low, but it was like January. Um, and I started then to get neurological symptoms quite badly. So I had double vision on this side when I look to my left. My face started to feel quite weird. It was like, it wasn't numb, but it wasn't normal. It just felt very bizarre. So I mentioned these to my GP, and she said, "All right, okay, so that's not good. Let's investigate it further." And it was at that point I went in. Long story short, I had an MRI, and I got called back the same day for the results, and that's when I was told that they'd found a brain tumour. Although they were a bit reluctant to say at first, come out and say it was a brain tumour. Yeah, so I just, you asked me how I felt, and I just walked into the consulting room and was presented with this MRI image and a computer screen, and you didn't need to be a brain surgeon to know the big white blob that was there shouldn't have been there. I was told I would have an urgent referral made, and yeah, it just went from there really. But it all, when I look back, it was kind of weird. It was like being caught up in this little bubble of weirdness. It's I remember driving home from the hospital when my husband was driving. He came and met me there. Um, and we're driving home, and it's just weird to watch other people walking in the street and going about their own normal lives, and yet we're in this like nightmare scenario of what's going to happen next.
And was that drive home just when you found out you had a brain tumor?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it's a common way of thinking when you've just been told something like that. I've heard this before from other people when they've been told they've got a diagnosis of something really serious. You just see someone laughing down the street, and
Yeah,
it must feel like everything's in slow motion for you, and
yeah,
so
absolutely. Yeah, very much.
massive worry, massive worry. And going back to your symptoms, so to start off with, obviously the fatigue. There's so many different things it could have been if you just have fatigue. So you just don't know. There's such a broad, and like you say, you put it down to your dog, and you start trying to understand why you're feeling like this, and you sort of start trying to guess, I suppose, don't you? And then obviously it's only when then you notice facial problems and your eye when you look to the left, that's when you then think, okay, something like that's not the dog, is it? Like that's something more.
Yeah,
So it's just interesting to think for any diagnosis really, like there are initial like symptoms that it's easy to brush aside, isn't it? And then it obviously over a period of time, there's a bigger symptom that you then it moves you to action on, doesn't it? So you obviously had surgery. How long was it between your diagnosis and your surgery?
So I was diagnosed in February 2018. I didn't have surgery until May. That was in part due to a mix-up initially with my paperwork. So the urgent referral was never really made. So we went privately. I mean, thankfully, my husband had private healthcare through work. So we were able to navigate a way into Salford Royal, which turned out to be a really good move because they were classed as one of the best centres in the country for dealing with this particular kind of brain tumour. So, I do believe things happen for a reason, and maybe my outcome wouldn't have been quite as good as it has been had I been anywhere else. Um, yeah, so I think I first saw a consultant at Salford at the beginning of March, and I remember it had been a particularly bad winter, excuse me, and we drove over there with shovels in the car, flasks of coffee. There was snow on the motorway, and we were just like so determined to get to that appointment. We weren't taking any chances. And yeah, we saw the consultant, and the hospital hadn't sent through the MRI images, so that was another delay. So I had to wait for my consultant to be able to access them. He then called me because he had said at that appointment, how big do you think it was? And I said, well, it must have been golf ball sized. And he's like, really? And I was like, yeah, it was really big on the MRI. And he's like, okay. So we talked through different options of treatment and, what it would actually mean at that appointment. And I was told, there's no need to panic. It's a really slow growing tumour. We can take our time and, have a proper look at the scans and see what's happening. And he called me back the following day after that appointment when he'd had chance to see these images and said, actually, he said, I know we said it was slow growing. He said, but there's, it is quite large. He said, you were right, it is quite large. And it was also a cystic tumour, which makes them quite unpredictable. So I think at the time I was diagnosed, it was about just over 3 centimetres. We arranged for me to have gentamicin injections. So gentamicin, for anyone that doesn't know, is an antibiotic which is normally used to treat, a wide range of infection. However, a side effect of gentamicin is that it destroys your inner ear mechanisms. So prolonged use can cause hearing loss and it can cause balance issues. So one of the problems that I was having was sort of a few problems with my balance really at this point now. I felt like, and I don't say it like I was, falling over or anything like that, but I felt as though I was on a boat when I was walking, like when you get off a boat that you've been on for a while and you haven't quite got your land legs back. I felt a bit like that all the time. So it was decided that I'd have a course of these injections into my ear. And this is quite a sort of a new treatment option, really. And what would happen is it would gradually destroy the balance mechanism in that ear rather than it be a sudden change after surgery, which you've then got to adapt to. So I started a course of 3 injections and they had to be spaced. I think it was about 10 days or 2 weeks apart each time. So obviously that created a time delay as well. And I got to the last injection, which wasn't particularly pleasant. And I went and had that done on, I think it was a Wednesday. Oh no, maybe it was Wednesday or Thursday. And then 2 days later, on the early hours of the Saturday, and I remember it was an Easter weekend in April, I woke up in the middle of the night with an excruciating headache. And obviously I'd had headaches on and off for quite a time actually. And this was worse than anything I'd had before. So I took a load of painkillers. Eventually I managed to get back to sleep. The following day it lingered. And by that dinner time that evening, I started being violently sick. And I remember thinking, because obviously I had to be first aid trained because of my work in school. And I remember thinking, this just isn't right. This isn't, this shouldn't be happening. And I said to my husband about it, and he's like, well, let's go to hospital. And I was like, no, I don't want to go to the hospital, So he got me to go in the end under the pretense that we would just go and see what they said. So I was admitted. I had a CT scan, and early hours, the on-call doctor came back and said to me that I had the tumour is actually hemorrhaged. So that became a medical emergency. I was then transferred to a hospital in Liverpool where it was stabilised. Excuse me. And then I was transferred to Salford Royal. It was treated with steroids, so they managed to bring the bleeding under control with steroids. And I was sent home then, and I had another 3-week wait until the planned surgery date, which was May. So obviously it was it felt like an absolute lifetime at that point, from the diagnosis in the February to surgery in the May. And for a period of time at the start, I was able to kind of function to some level of normality, but there comes a point when you stop being able to do business as usual, and that was probably towards sort of the end of March, I think.
Right. Wow. What a horrific time for you. Going back to the NHS, letting you down and mixing your form up. You're not the only one that's had to go private in the end, and you've got this brain tumor that you need sorting out, and someone's making a mistake with your form, or it's not really acceptable, is it really? And you pay all this money, in fact, your whole life to the NHS for something, and something like this happens, but and then you end up having to pay for it yourself. And someone else I spoke to a couple of weeks ago said that it's the money that you're investing in yourself, and you have to at the end of the day. And I think you did the right thing to go private. And then obviously you say, like, with the ear, the antibiotics that's making your hearing go. You've got the initial worry of your brain tumor, but then you've got all these other things that you're also worrying about. Oh, what if I can't hear? Or, and then there's all these other things that are just making you like even more anxious and scared. So it's like there's all these other things, isn't there, that go along with it?
Yeah, so it was a given that I was going to lose my hearing through the surgery anyway, which is
Oh,
why
was
I
it?
opted for that treatment. Yeah, because I thought if my hearing's going to go anyway, just losing it gradually over a few weeks.
So that was a definite.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but the day of the surgery, what was going on in your mind? I'm assuming you were scared.
Yeah, you could say. I think the run up to it was the worst. I think particularly the time around having the hemorrhage was particularly bad, because I did actually think at one point it would be lights out. And I remember lying on a bed in a side room at the hospital that they'd found me, which was dimly lit, because when I had the hemorrhage, I couldn't tolerate strong light at all. I was really struggling. So they found this like really dim side room for me to go in. And I just remember lying there thinking, I'm not gonna go like this here. But I was terrified. I didn't want to close my eyes because I thought I'm not going to wake up. My husband was with me, but he'd fell asleep on next to me, and I just thought, no, I don't want him to find me dead. I don't want to die like this, festering in a side room. So I just did everything I could to sort of stay awake and hang on as best I could till I got transferred. It was terrifying, but at the time I was that busy just sort of surviving that I didn't maybe think it through as much as I did afterwards. And then, obviously I had 3 weeks up to the surgery, which I did give it a lot of thought. There were times, I wrote letters to my family because I didn't think I'd come through surgery. If I did, I didn't know what I'd be like, because I've been, told of all these side effects that could potentially happen. There was risk of stroke, risk of hemorrhage, risk of death. So yeah, it was frightening, but I kind of reached a point where I couldn't worry myself anymore. And it was some friends of mine had said to me, you need to stop thinking like that. You just need to focus on what's going to happen afterwards. The day of your surgery is day one, if you like, and that's what I focused on. I stopped thinking about all the negative stuff, and it's really bizarre, but I'd come to peace with it all. It's really hard to explain. It was like, on the day of the surgery, I felt the most at peace with it than I had done the entire time, I think. I mean, I did have a bit of a meltdown on my way to theatre, but up until that point, I was quite, okay, I've got this far. I need to let them do what they do best, and I'll just deal with things as they arise on the other side, if you like.
It's like you've just accepted that. You've accepted it, and this is where you are, and it's out of your control now.
What is the alternative? I think we, in hindsight, I think we spend so much time in general worrying about things that probably won't even happen. We worry about things before they are a problem. I think, and that highlighted that to me actually. And now I try not to. I mean, we all do. We're only human, aren't we? But I try not to worry about things I've got no control over, and I try not to worry about things before they are a problem.
We're all conscious of the fact we're all going to die at some point. That's obviously, it's obvious, isn't it? But we don't actually think about it on a day-to-day basis. We just know it's going to come eventually, and we just don't focus on it. But then, like, this brings it to the front of your mind, doesn't it? And when you're actually, like, you're facing possibly death, like you're worrying that this actually could be, like you said, you were lying in the side room thinking, I don't want to die like this. I don't want my husband to find me dead, or and to have that thought, like, right now, like in your mind right now, you're facing that. Is what a massive worry, And I know it's easy for people to say, don't worry about things until they happen, and it takes some training to stop thinking like that. But when you're in that position, and there's a probability, then it must be so difficult. But the surgery was successful.
Yeah, so 100% of the tumour was removed, which is really good. The surgeons in the conversations that we'd had in the run up to this had said that their priority was preserving my facial nerve, because there was a high risk, because of where the tumour was, that my facial nerve would be damaged. And rather than risk permanent facial palsy, what they would do is, if they had to, they call it debulking. They would debulk as much of the tumour as they could, without causing any damage to the nerve. And then, if needed, I would have radiotherapy afterwards. But fortunately, and I didn't realise what a relief it was, because I was really worried about the whole facial palsy thing. So when they came back and said, they've removed 100% of the tumour, that was a huge relief. I didn't realise how much of a relief that would be until that point, which was really good. But then he said, you have got a bit of facial palsy. I was like, oh, no. But, they monitor the nerves very closely right through the surgery. And he said, everything was functioning properly when we closed up. So we're hopeful that it will recover. It's probably just trauma caused by the surgery and things being manipulated around that has caused it.
And did it recover?
It did, yeah. So, well, I say it's recovered. So initially, I couldn't close this eye at all. I had to have really thick eye drops to protect my eye, because obviously I couldn't produce tears. I still don't produce tears now on that side, so I use eye drops. I've never got them far away. So that can and does still cause problems. My face was totally numb, and it still is in part numb. Half my tongue is still numb. Half the inside of my mouth is still numb. And there is weakness in my face that I notice other people don't so much, but it becomes slightly worse, I think, when I'm tired. So yeah. It did recover. But yeah, the first few weeks were quite challenging, really, and it's a lot to get used to, because I think you kind of prepare yourself as best you can for how you could be after surgery, but until you're actually living it, you really can't.
So, I mean, there must have been an initial, like, a relief that a whole 100% of the tumour was gone and that was over with. And now it's just a case of adapting to what the side effects are afterwards.
Yeah.
And so I mentioned, obviously, at the start when I asked you actually how you were on a daily basis. What are the other, like, ongoing daily battles that brain tumour survivors have got to deal with? We mentioned fatigue and obviously some
Yeah.
face and hearing.
So many of the people that I've come into contact with have experienced facial palsy, particularly with the tumour that I had, which is a vestibular schwannoma. It's a low grade, classed as a low grade tumour. It's not cancerous. However, it can be life threatening, as it was in my case, depending on, where it is and, the problems it's causing. So mine prior to surgery was causing all kinds of other issues as well, like my heart rate, which is normally sort of low 50s, was over 110 24/7. My blood pressure was up, and that was all because it was causing compression to my brain stem, which is like your control center. So everything can go wrong if that's impacted, and that's why it had to come out. But yeah, on a daily basis, that's all gone back to normal now. But many people suffer with facial palsy still, and that causes problems in itself. So that can lead to like secondary eye infections. Last summer, I had like a cyst on my cornea because of my eye drying out in the wind. So I've got to be super careful of things like that, and always wear eye drops and have like eyewear that will sort of keep the wind out in the winter and in the summer as well if it gets too hot. So yeah, it's always something you've got to be thinking about. People, if their face is numb, they're then biting the side of the face, so that can cause infection and ulcers. It can cause dental issues as well, because you may not be producing as much saliva on that side as on the other, which controls bacteria. Balance issues are a problem. I mean, I wobbled into the door frame the other night, I had a nice little bruise on my face. And I think for the majority, I think fatigue is probably one of the most common and one of the most impactful side effects of having had a brain tumour. It never really goes away. You can't plan for it. What triggers it today might not trigger it tomorrow. You just have to kind of learn to accept it in many ways, and that is hard in itself. So that then leads to, it can lead to mental health issues for a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. And with fatigue, how bad is what actually is fatigue? Because there's many of us that will wake up tired one day and say, "Oh, I'm fatigued because I've done too much working out."
It's
Or
not tired. It is not tired. So this is what I often get told. I run a lot, and people will say, "Well, don't train so much." It is not like a physical tiredness at all. It is the most. I can only describe it as, if you imagine a bath full of water and someone pulls the plug, and it is literally a draining feeling from the head down, so you can't do anything about it, and you just have to sleep. So you can push through it to a degree, but eventually it will come back and bite you. Um, I did a video actually at one point to describe it, and it was explained to me in this way by someone on the acquired brain injury team that I worked with, and they said basically a normal person might have energy that's equivalent to a jug of water, a full jug, and then you think about the things that are important to you in life. So, for example, family, friends, socializing, work, training, for example, as 5 things. And you've got a cup for each one of those things. Now, that jug of water will fill each cup. However, when you've had it can be any kind of brain injury, but particularly related to a brain tumour in this instance, that jug of water never quite fills up the same afterwards. So on a good day, you might have half a jug of water in the morning. You've still got those 5 priorities that you need to fill. You can't do it. Something at some point will give. I can go out and train. That will mean that I can't go and socialise later that day. So that's very much what fatigue is, because unless you've experienced it, there's
Yeah.
no way that you could understand possibly what it's like at all.
There's a term I've researched called cognitive bandwidth,
Right.
which is like you've only got a certain amount of like energy to put into tasks throughout your whole day. You can only focus your brain on so many things
Mm.
before the cognitive bandwidth just runs out. Which is exactly like you're saying with the water and things. And it like that's the same for everybody. Like even if you've got a full up jug of water, we can only give our attention and time and focus to so many things on a daily basis before we just become overwhelmed. There's a good illustration I like about a juggler when he could be juggling 6 balls quite comfortably, but you throw a seventh one in and he'll start to struggle. Throw an eighth one in and he drops the whole lot. He doesn't just drop that one ball or the seventh ball; he drops all the balls. So you have to be very careful for everybody in the amount that we give our attention to. And obviously, then if you're suffering with fatigue and you only got half a jug of water, you have to be even more careful. Like you literally must have to say no to quite a lot of things to protect that half a jug that you've got.
It makes you very selective about what you give your energy to and who you give your energy to as well. And you soon realise, that some people are only there for what they can get out of a relationship. And so my circle of friends now is very small. And that sounds quite harsh, but that's the only way I can function. And I like to think that those friends that I do have are the true friends that will get it.
Yeah. Well, I thank you even more for coming on the podcast now because you've given me a little bit of that half a jug of water that you had. So, Sara, that's the hardship that you've had to face. How did you feel after the surgery? Did you have this like purpose that you now something had ignited inside of you? Because you've gone on to do so many positive things. I know you started off by challenging yourself. What are some of the challenges you went on to do after you were recovering and beyond your recovery?
Okay, so there was a time when I was in hospital that I didn't mention this actually, I couldn't walk after my surgery. I had to relearn how to walk and balance again. And I remember lying in bed, I couldn't even get to the bathroom on my own, thinking I would give anything just to go out and walk, let alone run. So I don't waste an opportunity now, because none of us know what lies around the corner, and I think there's a number of reasons I do what I do. I think the big one is I felt like I'd been, I can't think of the word, betrayed by my body almost. So there was a part of me that thought, right, I'm going to be hard to kill from this point on. So yeah, initially it was all about getting that confidence just to walk again. I was told I quite probably wouldn't ride a bike again because of the damage caused by the hemorrhage and the surgery. And, you need a fully functioning vestibular system. Well, mine is now down to 50% and it will stay that way. So I thought, right, okay, how hard can it be? So a few weeks after my op, I decided to have a go at riding a bike again, which was the most incredibly difficult thing I think at that point that I'd done, because you kind of do feel a bit invincible, don't you, in life? And you think, well, it can't be that hard. Like they say, once you learn to ride a bike, you never forget. But I got back on a bike and it felt like I'd never ridden one before in my life. It was really quite scary. A bit like, when you try to walk again, you just assume you get up and put one foot in front of the other. But when you get up and the signal's not getting from your brain to your feet to move, it's terrifying. But I decided to go right back to basics. I lowered the seat on the bike as low as I could because the first issue I had was my balance was so bad I couldn't even get on the thing. I lowered the saddle down as low as it would go, and I literally just pushed myself up and down the patio in the garden, like a toddler on a little balance bike, and I worked my way from there. And eventually, things started to click. Now again, because of the balance issues that I have, I can ride a bike. I don't enjoy it like I used to because it is so fatiguing for me, because obviously it's taken me twice as much now to stay upright as it would have done beforehand. Plus, like, when you're out on the roads and that, it's a challenge to hear traffic and everything going on around you. So yeah, I managed to go out on my bike. Then I started to go out hiking again. So I think it was about, oh no, let's just rewind. I'd entered a race before my surgery, and I thought, I've got no idea whether I will have had surgery, whether I wouldn't have had surgery, if I'd had it, what state I'd be in. So I just entered a race for life. I thought, that's my goal. And this is what works for me, having little goals along the way. So I decided that I would enter this race. And that happened to be, I think I had a checkup at 6 weeks. And that's when I was given the all clear to go out and train again. And the race was 2 weeks later. So it was the worst 5K I've ever run in my life. And it was more of a wobble around the course, really, but I did it. So I was really chuffed with that. Then a couple of weeks after that, I went back out hiking. That was really hard, because it was really uneven ground, and it makes it much harder and more physically demanding, because not only was I still recovering from the surgery, but also the whole balance issue thing makes it harder. Then I decided I was going to do a skydive. So I did a skydive in October. And then we went away to the Alps. And that's when the wheels came off for me. Because I think in my head, I'd kind of felt like, oh, I've got this. I'm nailing it. I can ride a bike when they said I couldn't. I've done a skydive. I've been out hiking. And yet it was the whole fatigue thing that became an issue for me. And I fell over a few times. And we took mountain bikes out, and I felt quite sick. So I came back from that feeling quite angry and, frustrated with everybody and angry with the world. And it was at that point I got referred to a neuropsychologist to sort of help me untangle everything that had gone on. And I think it was at that point for me that I realised just how much, when I look back, how much I've been through in such a short space of time. But that's what I was struggling with at that point. So I managed to sort of, with their support, get past that. I've done the Yorkshire Three Peaks. That was a year. That was to celebrate the 1 year anniversary of my surgery. I then went back to the Alps and had a much better experience out there. So I went and did some climbing in the Alps. Then I was given the opportunity to climb Toubkal in Morocco, which is where my book sort of stemmed from. So I then documented everything that had happened from my diagnosis through my surgery, recovery, and to the point of summiting Toubkal in Morocco. And that was, I think it was about 15 months after my surgery. So I was quite chuffed with that. But then that kind of raises the bar, doesn't it? And where do you go from there? And being quite goal driven, I was like, well, what can I do next? We had COVID kind of cropped up along the way, but I'd entered a 100-kilometre ultramarathon in the Lake District. I'd never run more than a half marathon, and I hated it. And I was determined I was going to do it. But I kept hitting a wall, because I was thinking, I'll just keep training that little bit more every week. I'll make my long run slightly longer until I'm doing sort of the distances I need to be doing. And I'd get to about 40 minutes in and just hit a wall. And I really struggled with that, because I think it became so easy to blame my brain tumour for everything as well. And, I don't know, it was really weird. But it makes you doubt yourself. It makes you doubt, your own ability to do things. But I managed to find a coach, which is a story in itself, because after my surgery, I'd written to loads of gyms, which is something I'm keen to highlight, actually. I'd written to quite a few different gyms, I'm not mentioning names, personal trainers, explained my situation, and was told either no, can't help you, or they didn't bother replying at all. And how does that leave you feeling when you've already had your life turned upside down and you want to get back to some sense of normality, and then you're being told, no, we can't train you. I did find a coach, John, if anyone's interested, e3coach.com, brilliant. So his involvement has been game changing for me, because it never says I can't do anything. We just find ways to train that work around fatigue very much. And that's opened the door for me to do so many more things. So he coached me to do my first 100k, which I did quite successfully. He then helped me. I did it again the following year because I was a bit disappointed with my time. So I managed to knock 4 hours off my time the following year, which I was quite pleased with. But again, I was like, right, what can I do next? So I think during lockdown, Carla Molinaro had broken the world record for running from Land's End to John O'Groats. So I thought to myself, why is it always elite athletes, that have gone on to do these things? Sure, everybody has to start somewhere. So I texted John and I said, look, what does it take to go from running 100k to Land's End to John O'Groats?
And this is the whole length of England. From England to Scotland, Great Britain.
845 miles. And he didn't reply for a few days, and I just thought, oh, that answers that question, that question there. But then he did reply, and he was like, okay. He said we'd probably need like 6 months of, concentrated training. And so in 2022, I set off from Land's End, and I got 4 days in and picked up an injury, which was very annoying, to say the least. He told me I can't swear. So, I got whisked off to hospital with, and this had been niggling me at this point for a whole day, and I'd not slept that night because of it. And he caught me trying to take my leg up a bit, and my leg had turned like this horrible purpley reddy colour, and we just weren't happy. So I went off to A&E and was told that I had suspected stress fracture, shin splint, and acute tendonitis. But I was actually quite pleased that I managed to run probably, I think it was 40 miles the previous day, feeling pain like that. And I thought that actually goes to show how much, not that I'd recommend it, but how powerful your mind can be when you are that focused on something. You can push that limit. So that was a positive I took from that, and I was determined I was going to finish it. So I went back in March last year and completed the journey. So I got from, it was probably about, I don't know, it must have been about 700, just under 700 miles that I did to complete it, from where I'd had to stop at A&E up to John O'Groats. So and it didn't all go to plan. It was a bit of a nightmare, really, but I did it, and I was quite pleased. But I've ticked that box, and I wouldn't do it again. So now the question is, what do you do? So I went to, I think after doing that, I think anyone that's trained for a marathon and completed it knows what it's like afterwards. You're like, oh, what do I do now? It's like, it's like a real anticlimax. You finish it, you've got your medal, you've got your t-shirt, and then all of a sudden this goal that you had is just gone, and what's next? So that was really hard for me, and I think because I have become very goal driven, more so since the brain tumour diagnosis. It was really hard for me to get my head around that, and I wasn't in a great place, because I did it to raise awareness of brain tumours, and I did it to raise funds for a number of brain tumour charities, and trying to get any exposure was near on impossible. I don't know why. I think because it's not a pink fluffy cancer, people aren't particularly interested in brain tumours, are a bit of a thing that no one likes to talk about. So that was hard for me. And then I think within about 2 weeks of getting back home, having completed that, 2 more people that I'd got to know in the brain tumour community had passed away because of it. So I felt like, well, what did that actually achieve? Not very much. And so, I went down a bit of a black hole at that point. Then we went back to France last summer, and there was one particular hike that we'd done, and I remember that day I didn't want to do it. And we took a bit of, it wasn't a wrong turn, but we like to take an exploratory route, shall we say. And I was on quite this exposed little ledge. And I actually at that moment thought, I need more of this in my life. It just gave me that buzz back. And I'd had since I reached the top of Toubkal the first time, I was determined that at some point I was going to go back one day and take a group of brain tumour survivors with me, so they could experience just how empowering it is to achieve something like that, having gone through what we've been through. So as soon as I got back, that's what I decided to do. I made a few calls, and that was what we were going to do, and that was the start of what is now the Beyond Recovery project.
And so this is I've written down a few notes here as you were talking, because there's loads to unpick from this, and like that's why I wanted you on this podcast, because you've got such an inspirational like comeback from the point of your, basically you've been on your own beyond recovery journey. So first of all, to go back to what you said about when you were unable to walk and you were looking out and thinking, I just want to be able to walk and I can't. And there was a time last week I said to myself I was going to go out for a local hike. And of all the nice days we've had recently, the day I decided to go, it was chucking it down with rain. And I thought, I'm not going today. And I was making excuses. And I suddenly had this thought, and I thought, do you know what? There's some people right now that are in hospital that are looking out of their window thinking, I just want to be able to walk. And there's me, completely able, saying, I don't want to walk because it's raining. So it just made me think of that as a lesson for anyone. Like, just, like you said about your body was letting you down. And we all take our bodies for granted, don't we, on a daily basis? It's such a wondrous thing, like an evolutionary thing that we've just, our bodies are so clever. They repair itself. They're capable of so much, and we just take that for granted. And then when something goes wrong, that's only when we realise, oh, my body's letting me down. And, so it's having that appreciation and gratitude on a daily basis that we've got a body, we've got our health. The rain shouldn't matter. Just do what you want to do and stop making excuses, because there's some people that just can't do that. And then you go on to say, you set yourself a goal. And I talk about this all the time, and how important it is to set a goal. Because without a goal, you've got no drive, and you're just going to sit there feeling fed up and depressed. So you set yourself that goal of the 5K run. And like you said, it wasn't the greatest of run, you wobbled around, but that got you on your feet. It gave you a purpose. And then from there, you build momentum, and you went to the Alps. Now, this is a vital thing, because you said you came back from the Alps and you felt like you had a fall, and you were like disheartened by the trip, because you feel like you're blaming your brain tumour for your falls and fatigue. So this just highlights that even when we do push ourselves, it's not going to be easy. Like, we're going to have to overcome this mental battle that we're facing on a daily basis. And you could just be suffering from your mental health on a daily basis. And that's just something you've got to get through in order to accomplish anything. And then you've came back from that. You didn't feel great when you came back. But then you went on that Yorkshire 3-peak challenge. And then you went back to the Alps and had a much better time. So it just highlights the fact that not everything you do is going to be perfect, but that failed attempt, if you want to view it as that, then leads you on to going back and accomplishing things. So life is a bit of an up and down road when you're trying to succeed. And only by going through that process did you then raise the bar, because you wouldn't be able to raise the bar without going to the Alps and having a bad experience, and then coming back and pushing yourself originally with the 5K. Going to Toubkal and raising that bar wouldn't have been possible. So you've then taken that small goal, built momentum, failed, got yourself back on it, built more momentum, pushed yourself higher, summited Mount Toubkal, the highest mountain in North Africa. And then you still had battles and doubts, because then you come back from that massive adventure and you come back and then you're despondent again because you're thinking, what do I do now? And now you end up going back down a little bit. So it's this up and down thing, and then you overcome that, and that makes you think. And there's a term that Tony Robbins, do you know Tony Robbins? He has a term and an acronym that he uses called CANI, CANI, and it's continuous and never-ending improvement. And when you realise that, obviously, in your case, the summit of Mount Toubkal is not the end. That's not the end goal. It's a continuous improvement in your journey. And when people realise that, and Tyson Fury, the heavyweight champion of the world boxer, he fought Vladimir Klitschko, won the belts, and then went on suicide because he wanted to drive his Ferrari off a bridge and kill himself because he suddenly lost all his purpose. He'd fought so hard to gain the belts that after that, he became suicidal. When we realise that it's all part of the process and part of our journey, which you then realised after reflecting, that you then went on to use your experiences, your journey, to then help other people, which I believe, and we're talking about recovery now, is the last stage of healing, is when we're using what we've been through to then help other people on that same journey. And that's the key. And Robin Sharma, global humanitarian, says this well. He says, we're not happiest when we're watching telly or fooling around or checking our Facebook for likes. We're happiest when we're growing. And you then taking what you've learned to help other people is you growing, and you're helping other people to grow. And then you've developed this new purpose for yourself. And that purpose comes in the Beyond Recovery project, which is a massive, massive, great thing you're doing to help other people. And I've seen your journey. I've been following you on Facebook. So how is that going? The Beyond Recovery project, how is that helping other people now?
I decided that I wanted to sort of use what had helped me to like you say, I suppose, to help other people. And very often that's not the mainstream way of recovery. It's not what a hospital would recommend. It's not what your doctors would probably tell you to go and do. Certainly not what a lot of occupational therapists and vestibular rehab therapists tell people to do. But it works. So what the aim of the Beyond Recovery project is to support the physical and mental health and well-being of brain tumour survivors, whatever tumour they've had, whether it's cancerous, whether it's low grade like mine was. And we do that through a variety of outdoor and nature-based activities. And I think one of the first steps for me was getting confidence to go back out and walk, and not just to the shops. I remember the first walk I went to the shops up the road from me on my own was utterly terrifying because it just felt so weird not to have someone next to me ready to grab me in case I fell. It was like sensory overload, just listening for cars in case I missed one because I knew I couldn't hear as well. I think in many ways I've kind of adapted to that, and I am more, I have better sort of spatial awareness now, and I am more aware of my surroundings. I've got used to that. It's not to say it's better, but I've become used to that. So to go and just do a walk to the shops was scary, and I wanted a way that would give people confidence to go and do those things by themselves, and then maybe take it to the next step. So we've organised groups now around the UK. I think we've got about 9 at the moment, from Northern Ireland. We've just set one up right down on the south coast, and another in East Anglia. So we've got quite a few sort of in the northwest. We'll be starting one up in Leeds, East Anglia, down in the south, and we're looking to expand on that all the time. But these walking groups are led by people who have had a brain tumour themselves, so they get it. They get it. There's no need to explain to anybody what you're going to find challenging, because we've all been there. And that's the beauty of it, really, because I know I was a member of an outdoor club, I still am, but in those early days I found it really frustrating having to say, this is a bit difficult for me. Can we slow down a bit? Or, in fact, I probably wouldn't say I'd just battle through, but it was a real struggle. And so I think, to find that support with people who have been there and done it already is a big confidence boost just for people to get out there and join the group in the first place. So that's one thing that we do, and the walks are really easy. They're free to attend, and it's just a nice walk through forest for about 3 or 4 miles, and it's getting people out, it's getting them physically active, and most importantly, they're getting that peer support as well. There's no greater therapy, I don't think, than speaking to someone who's been there. You can't, with the best will in the world. A psychiatrist doesn't always get it because they've not lived that experience. We also have wellbeing events, so we will be holding another wellbeing weekend at the end of October. They're held out in Snowdonia, but we're looking again to expand that and do it around the UK, make it more accessible for people, because unfortunately with a brain tumour diagnosis, that very often means you lose your driving licence. So that's a massive issue for a lot of people. It takes away their independence. So we're trying to make these things as accessible as we possibly can. Also, what else do we do? Oh, okay. So people who have come and joined us on the smaller walks that maybe are looking for a bigger challenge, we've got those as well. So last June just gone, I did fulfil that goal. I had that ambition to take a group of brain tumour survivors up to Tubcal, and we summited. We got everybody up and down, not just Tubcal. We went and did a 3,650 metre the following day as well, which they weren't expecting, but they did it, and that to see those people on that journey from where they started. One guy was told, and this is someone who used to be in the military, loved being physically active, loved doing tabbing races. He was told he wouldn't do big mountains again. He'd already done Killy, and then obviously he got his diagnosis, was told he wouldn't do big mountains again. And I think he kind of resigned himself to that fact, but obviously then he heard about what we were doing, wanted to be a part of it, and he was one of the people on the team. And to see where he came from and the issues that he had along the way, and to actually get to that summit was just unbelievable, and that makes it so rewarding for me. It still makes me quite emotional now. And we're repeating that again next year, so to make it slightly more inclusive for people who've maybe got shunts fitted because of fluid on the brain, that can't go to altitude, we're going to do a 100-kilometre trek of the Sahara Desert next year. And all of this is funded through fundraising. We don't get any government funding. We operate as a community interest company rather than a charity. So obviously we're missing out on gift aid, we're missing out on a lot of grants and things. So we've got an amazing team of fundraisers, and we encourage as many people as we can to get out there and do fundraising, as I will be in a few weeks' time with my next challenge. But yeah, so that's what we do, and it's brilliant to see the results. It's brilliant to get the feedback from people, and it's brilliant not only to see the progress that they've made to achieve that goal, but where that then takes them going forward. It gives them confidence in other areas of their life as well.
I think the listeners can now understand why I wanted to get you on the podcast, because from where you've been, and now you're all over the country, all over Great Britain, you've now set up these groups with a brain tumour survivor, in charge. And like you say, like, you don't have to explain anything to them because they've done it. And you said something about having experience, like, an occupational therapist might not advise you to do this, and I always say that the best qualification anybody can have is experience. If you've been through something and you've done something and you've overcome something, then you're the best person to go to. You can have a qualification, which is great. You've got the knowledge, but you don't have the understanding. So setting up these groups all over the country. So no matter where you are really in Great Britain, if you've overcome a brain tumour, there will be a group fairly near. Like, that's your mission.
That's the mission. That is to get as many as we can, even if it's just 2 or 3 people in a group, just to have have it, maybe within an hour and a half drive of someone, that's my sort of goal. I think we've got a long way to go yet, but when I think about how far we've come in the space of 12 months, because none of this had happened 12 months ago, nothing's impossible, is it? The only limit, I think, is what we put on it. So yeah, if there's anyone out there that wants to come and lead walks for us, that would be brilliant, because it makes it all that more accessible to other people then as well.
And I was going to say, did you? You obviously didn't, but I was going to say, did you expect when you were diagnosed with a brain tumour that you would be here now in the Beyond Recovery project, helping people all over Great Britain?
No.
Exactly.
No, and I still have to pinch myself, because it's not without its challenges. Obviously, every day I get up and I think, oh, have you got the funding to do? Oh, because we also provide counselling sessions as well. So we've just hooked up with a counsellor who does outdoor counselling therapy. So that ties in very nicely with the whole sort of ethos that we've got of being outdoors in nature.
Wow.
So yeah, I wake up and I'm thinking, right, how can I get the funding for, an extra 10 counselling sessions next year? Or, how can I get the funding to get an extra person on this trip? And yeah, and it is really hard. It is really tiring. And I sometimes have to think, well, actually, I still have my issues as well, with the fatigue and everything. And I do have to sort of step back occasionally. But yeah, it is really rewarding.
And this counselling is out as you're walking.
It can be, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So,
That's a
so
really good
yeah,
idea.
yeah, because not only do you get like the sort of peer counselling, if you like, because we've all been there and we've all got tips for overcoming different scenarios that we've come up against. But yeah, to have like a professional on board as well is just great. Yeah, so hopefully anyone that needs it, and unfortunately there are quite a few people out there that do, who can't access it for whatever reason through the NHS, whether it's availability in that area or funding or just sort of waiting times. We're hopeful that we can get them some support, even if it just starts with coming out on a walk and just chatting to somebody else on the walk. There's always somebody that's available to listen.
Yeah. So, aside from the Beyond Recovery project, what's your next personal challenge?
Right, so in just under 4 weeks' time, I'm flying out to Jordan to run 220 kilometres through the Wadi Rum Desert. So
Oh
that's
my God.
my personal challenge and a fundraiser for the Beyond Recovery project.
Wow. So you're not taking anything lightly.
Well, after having done like Land's End to John O'Groats, that was another, well, where the heck do you go from here moment. And I had a chat with my coach and he said, okay, he said, so think about the things you liked about doing that and the things that you didn't like. And I was like, well, I'm not running on roads ever again. And he said, well, he said there's a whole load of different challenges out there that you could take on. So it doesn't have to be in this country. And I was like, oh, okay. So bit of a light bulb moment. And I came, I'd heard of the Wadi Rum Ultra. I'm always so full of doubt when I take on anything like this. I mentioned doubt quite a lot in my book, actually. So doubt kind of became quite a main character. Um, he still lurks around, and yeah, I'd come across this event, and I thought, I'll never be able to do something like that. But I thought that about Land's End to John O'Groats, but then I always think, okay, rather than thinking what if I can't, how about what if I can? And I always try not to think of the big picture, but then think about the goal. So Wadi Rum, and then I think, right, okay, what do I need to do to get there? And I looked at all the race information, and I thought there's no distance really daily that's greater than any day that I did on Land's End to John O'Groats, because I was running about 40 miles a day on average.
Wow.
The issues, the issues for me come down to my deficits, if you like, because of my surgery. So running on sand with 50% balance function is a challenge if it's deep sand. So I've had to go out training on beaches. The the heat is another issue, and I was really hoping for like a really sort of late heat wave this year, so I could get some heat training in. But if we're hitting 20 degrees, I'm lucky. So I'm doing lots of weight training in my garage with the heater on, just to get hot and uncomfortable, really. Because I think, well, those adaptations then take place, whatever, whether I'm running in it or just weight training.
That makes sense now. When I saw a post that you put on the other day, when you said I've turned all the heating up in my house while I'm doing a work, and I was like, why is she doing that for? And now I know.
Now you know. Yeah. So, and actually, I got to know Joe Pavey. So Joe Pavey is a 5-time Olympian, and she, and again, I think these people I've got to know through the worst experience of my life has just been life changing in itself. So Joe was saying to me, anytime you've got work to do on your laptop, just go into a room, shut the door, whack the heater on. I'm like, okay. I would sit in my car, put the heater on. Everyone hates me because they get in and they're like, geez, how hot do you want it in here? But it works. And I know it works because when we were out in Morocco, I think there was one day that was particularly hot, and someone said, God, it's so hot. And I thought, actually, yes, it is. But at no point had it even entered my psyche to think it's a really hot day today. So I thought, it is working. I might not think it's working because I'm not out running in heat, but those little environmental changes at home that I'm making, putting the heating on, training in it in different ways, it's all making a difference. So I'm hoping that, it's about finding the edge over other people. I think, well, if other people aren't so great in the heat, hope none of them are watching this. If other people aren't so great in the heat, that gives me an edge over them, So I know, from a mental point of view, I know I can get from A to B. What happens in the middle bit isn't always pretty, but I know that I'm determined enough from what I've been through to be able to do that. And I know that I can push through. And I think you could be the fittest person in the world, but if you don't have that determination's the right word, but if you don't have that ability to sort of override what your brain's telling you to do, like, I want to stop, without that you can be as fit as anything and still not complete it. So yeah, it's just about finding the little edges here and there.
So there you go, from hardly being able to walk after your surgery to taking on a 5K, very wobbly 5K, as you said, to then running the whole length of Great Britain, to now about to run, how many miles was it?
It's 220 kilometers. I can't remember what it is in miles.
220 kilometers.
Yeah.
Like, that just proves to anybody that, number one, no matter what hardship you're facing, you can always overcome it, and you can always use that to flip it into the biggest positive that you've ever had. And that's the key to this whole conversation, really. And you're proof of that. And one thing else you said about, why does it have to be athletes? Like, you see the athletes completing the big running events or whatever. Why is it always athletes? It's not always athletes. It's everyday people with success stories to share, like yourself. And that's the whole point I've made this podcast, because every single person can offer this massive inspiration for everybody else. And so you're proof of that. And obviously you've written a book as well. I just wanted to mention your book for people watching on the YouTube. It's SICKBED to Summits. And that's how I came to follow you, Sara, is because I was on Facebook and I saw an ad for this book, and I just loved the title, SICKBED to Summits. It just literally tells you exactly like what the book's about. Obviously, from this end, from where you were to where you're now are, and what you've achieved. It's a story of triumph over adversity, and it's on Amazon, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I bought this book, didn't know who you were, bought the book, read the book, and that's when I then started to follow you online. And it's basically a really, really inspiring book, and I really recommend anyone to buy it. SICKBED to Summits. It documents Sara's remarkable journey through both triumph and disaster, and she details the treatment, life-threatening complications, and an extraordinary recovery to fulfill her quest not only for a normal life, but beyond, to the challenge and adventure that awaits her. An amazing role model to those having to go through similar treatment. 100% get the book. And can people follow you online?
Yeah, so as like an author and endurance athlete, I'm on Facebook at Sara Crosland, I think. And the Beyond Recovery Project is also on there as well, and the handle is at the Beyond Recovery Project. We've got a website for the Beyond Recovery Project, which is just beyondrecoveryproject.org. And I've got my own website, which is just saracrossland.com, and all the social media links are also on those two websites.
Brilliant. Sara, thank you very much for your time in coming on. Like I said, I wanted to get you on from the minute I had the idea of the podcast. I had you in mind, so I really appreciate it. There's so much advice that you've given other people who are listening to this to take it into their life. If you could give someone one piece of last advice, like one main golden rule, what would that be for them to take away?
Don't overthink it. I think whatever goal you set yourself is doable. You just need to find the right people to help you, and there are people out there. You just need to sort of get out there and find your tribe, if you like. And break it down. So just don't think. I think when I was doing Land's End to John O'Groats as an example, I don't think I ever thought of it as running the whole country. It was broken down into each day, which was around 40 miles. And each day was broken down into 5-mile blocks. So I ran 5 miles, I had a break, ran 5 miles, had a break. And, it works. And that's the approach that I take to everything. And even when I was ill, there were times in the run up to my surgery when I was pretty much bedridden and I couldn't move without being sick because of where the tumour was and how it was affecting my balance. So I had like constant nausea and motion sickness. And, I would think, right, okay, I need to get up and go to the bathroom. But then I'd break it down. So I need to sit up, then I need to throw up, then I need to stand up, then I need to throw up. And I did that all the way to the bathroom and back. It just becomes more, I wouldn't say it's more doable. It is doable anyway, but it becomes easier to see how things are possible when it's a little thing rather than some massive thing. So yeah, don't overthink it. Just break it down into goals, find people to help you, and go and do it, because none of us know what tomorrow will bring.
That's absolutely brilliant advice, and I love that. First of all, I need to sit up, then I need to throw up, then I need to get up. And you can actually take that into your daily life anyway, can't you? Like we were saying about your ups and your downs and your failures and your successes. First of all, you need to sit up, then you need to throw up, then you need to stand up. Yeah. And that's a brilliant way. I'm going to remember that one. So, Sara, thank you so much again for coming on. This has really been beneficial for the listeners of the podcast. I really hope you've enjoyed listening to this inspiring story. Take what you can from it and apply it in your own life, and apply it to every time you face any hardship. Remember that there's a way of overcoming it, a way of using it in a positive way, and you never know what you're capable of when you're facing triumph and adversity. So thank you so much, Sara, for coming on. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Welcome back again in the future.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks very much. Have a great rest of your day.
I will do. Yeah.